Part 1. Professor Calaor wheezed, his respiratory tendrils fluttering desperately as he adjusted his gravity compensator for the third time in as many minutes. And here I thought the recruitment officer was joking about the atmospheric pressure, he muttered to himself. The sleek chrome-plated buildings of the Earth's premier intergalactic academy stretched toward the painfully bright local star these humans so casually called the Sun. Calaor's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, each set adjusting independently to filter out the harsh radiation that these humans seemed to thrive in. By the Great Void, how did they manage to evolve in such conditions? He thought, his mind boggling at the sheer absurdity of it all. Professor Calaor. Welcome, welcome, a voice chirped from behind him. Turning around, and immediately regretting the quick movement in this gravity, Calaor found himself face to tentacles with Professor Blip Blop, a centurion whose usual luminescent blue skin had taken on a distinctly pale shade. I see you're experiencing the full Earth welcome package, as the humans call it, Blip Blop said, their tentacles twisting into what Calaor recognized as the centurion equivalent of a nervous laugh. Indeed, Calaor managed to respond, trying to maintain his dignity while his legs trembled under the crushing gravitational force. I was told this posting would be challenging, but surely the stories about human educational methods are exaggerated? Blip Blop's tentacles twisted further, causing ripples of bioluminescence to cascade across their skin. Oh, my dear colleague, if anything, they're understated. Just yesterday, I observed what they call a kindergarten recess. The tiny humans the centurion shuddered dramatically, were deliberately falling from elevated structures. For fun. They call them slides and monkey bars. The human instructors just stood there, smiling. Before Calaor could properly process this disturbing information, a holographic notification materialized before his eyes. His tentacles curled in dismay as he read the message. Copy assignment update. Professor Calaor. Class observation schedule. Earth Standard Time 0900 hours. Subject, Human Physical Education. Location, Main Gymnasium. Note, please ensure your medical insurance is up to date. Physical Education. Calaor's voice cracked on the last word. They have a whole subject dedicated to physical exertion. In this gravity? A passing human instructor, built like what Calaor could only describe as a mobile mountain, smiled cheerfully. Oh, don't worry, Professor. Today's just a basic warm-up session. We save the real fun for next week. As Calaor watched the human stride away, seemingly unbothered by the crushing gravity, he couldn't help but notice how the metal floor actually vibrated with each of the human's steps. His upper eyes darted to Blip Blop, who had taken on an even paler shade of blue. Perhaps, Calaor said slowly, his scientific credentials suddenly feeling very inadequate, I should have accepted that teaching position on the methane ice fields of Neptune instead. The warning bell rang, it sounded eerily similar to what Calaor imagined a death knell would sound like. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the thunderous approach of what could only be a herd of human students. This was going to be an interesting first day, if he survived it. Professor Calaor huddled in what the humans called the observation deck of the gymnasium, though survival bunker might have been a more appropriate term. His fellow alien faculty members, Professor Blip Blop and the newly arrived Dr. Zix, who insisted the 3 Z's were silent, pressed against the reinforced glass, their various appendages trembling. What in the name of the void are they wearing? Dr. Zix whispered, his antennae twitching in disbelief. Below them, 30 human students jogged around the gymnasium's perimeter, each wearing what appeared to be combat armor. Calaor consulted his data pad, then made a sound that could only be described as a squeak of terror. Those are weighted vests. Apparently, running in Earth's gravity isn't challenging enough for them. His voice rose several octaves. They're carrying an additional 20 kilograms each. But that's Blip Blop's bioluminescent spots flashed in distress patterns. That's more than my entire body mass. The human instructor, the same mountain-like being Calaor had met earlier, stood in the center of the gym, bellowing encouragements. "Come on, people. This is just the warm-up. My grandmother can run faster than that, and she's got 2 artificial hips." "Warm up," all 3 alien professors said in unison, their various alien anatomies expressing horror in uniquely specific ways. A student, apparently feeling that merely running with enough weight to crush a small alien wasn't challenging enough, started doing something even more alarming. They propelling themselves into the air. Deliberately. Against the gravity, Calaor's tentacles wrapped around his data pad so tightly it creaked. "The humans call it skipping," Blip Blop said weakly. "Oh, that's nothing," said a cheerful voice behind them. They turned to find Professor Sarah Chen, one of the human faculty members, grinning at them. "Wait until you see them doing burpees." "Burpees?" Dr. Zix asked, immediately regretting his curiosity. As if on cue, the mountain-like instructor's voice boomed across the gymnasium. "All right, kids, time for everyone's favorite. Give me 50 burpees." The alien professors watched in horror as 30 humans simultaneously threw themselves to the ground, pushed themselves back up, jumped into the air, and repeated the process. The floor trembled with each synchronized impact. This must be some sort of military training," Calaor said weakly, trying to make sense of the madness before him. "Surely this isn't standard education." Professor Chen laughed. "Oh, no, this is just regular gym class. Pretty basic stuff, really. Though," she paused, pulling out a stack of papers, "we do have something special planned for next week. Just need to get these permission slips signed." Zix's upper right eye caught a glimpse of the form's header, "Consent for outdoor practical training session with live specimens." "Live specimens?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Oh, yes," Professor Chen beamed. "We find it really helps the students understand practical applications of their physical training. Don't worry, we've got all the safety protocols in place. The force fields are tested weekly, and we always have tranquilizer guns on hand. Just in case." The alien professors exchanged looks of pure horror. Before any of them could inquire further about these ominous specimens, the mountain instructor's voice boomed again. "Great work, everyone. Now, let's move on to the obstacle course. First one through gets to help set up next week's practical session." The students cheered as if the prospect of more physical torture was something to celebrate. I think I need to lie down," Blip Blop said faintly, their blue skin now almost white. "Oh dear," Professor Chen said, looking concerned. "You might want to step out before they start the wall climb. Some of our alien observers find it a bit intense." "Wall climb?" Calaor asked, against his better judgment. She pointed to a sheer vertical surface, at least 10 meters high. "Don't worry, we removed the flame jets after last semester's incident." As the sound of 30 eager humans thundering toward the obstacle course filled the air, Calaor made a mental note to update his will. He had a feeling he was going to need it. Especially after spotting the words "release forms for wildlife interaction" at the bottom of those permission slips. Somehow, he suspected that wildlife on a death world like Earth meant something very different from the harmless floating spores back home. "I must have misread the schedule," Professor Calaor muttered, his tentacles nervously adjusting his gravity compensator as the transport vehicle hummed along the forest path. Surely, practical wildlife interaction training is a euphemism for observing small, harmless creatures from a safe distance. "Oh, no, that's next semester's biology class," Professor Chen said cheerfully from the driver's seat. "Today is much more hands-on." In the back of the transport, Dr. Zix was frantically searching the galactic network on his data pad. According to Earth's wildlife database, this preserve contains something called wolves, and his antennae went completely rigid. "Bears. Don't forget the mountain lions," one of the students called out helpfully from the next vehicle. "They're the best part." Blip Blop's bioluminescence flickered in what appeared to be Morse code for SOS. The vehicles pulled up to a massive enclosed area that stretched for several kilometers in each direction. Force field generators hummed ominously at regular intervals along the perimeter fence. A cheerful sign read, "Copy, welcome to Earth's premier intergalactic academy wildlife training ground. Please ensure all safety protocols are followed and your insurance is current." The mountain-like instructor, who had introduced himself as Coach Rodriguez, stepped out of his vehicle and clapped his hands together with enough force to make the alien professors jump. "All right, everyone, beautiful day for some cardio with our furry friends, isn't it?" "Cardio?" Calaor whispered in horror. "With predators? Now, who remembered their scent markers?" Coach Rodriguez bellowed. Every student raised their hand. "Excellent. And who's wearing their tracking beacons?" Again, all hands went up. "Perfect." Coach Rodriguez grinned. "Professor Chen, are our furry training partners ready?" Professor Chen consulted her data pad. "Looks like the wolves are in the north quadrant, the bears in the east, and the mountain lions, oh, they're feeling playful today. They're scattered all over." "Fantastic." Coach Rodriguez rubbed his hands together. "Nothing like a little hide-and-seek to get the heart pumping. All right, students, remember your training. Stay in pairs, keep your comms open, and if you encounter any aggressive behavior, use your tranq guns. But only as a last resort, we want this to be a learning experience for both you and our furry friends. Any questions?" A sea of eager human faces shook their heads. The alien professors, on the other hand, looked like they were about to faint. "Great. Let's head out." Coach Rodriguez waved his hand, and the force field shimmered, creating an opening just large enough for the students to pass through. As the humans jogged into the preserve, whooping with excitement, Professor Calaor turned to his colleagues, his tentacles trembling. "Gentle beings," he said, his voice shaking, "I believe we may have severely underestimated the humans' definition of education." Dr. Zix and Professor Blip Blop could only nod in mute agreement, their eyes fixated on the permission slips that Professor Chen was now cheerfully distributing. At the top of each form, in bold lettering, were the words, "Waiver of liability for potential mauling, dismemberment, or death." Calaor swallowed hard. It was going to be a long semester. The alien professors huddled together in the observation blind, a reinforced structure that overlooked the wildlife preserve. They watched in a mixture of awe and horror as the human students fanned out into the wilderness, moving with a predatory grace that belied their youth. "I don't understand," Professor Blip Blop said, their spots pulsing with anxiety. "Why would they willingly seek out dangerous creatures? On my homeworld, we have a saying, if it has claws, run and hide, before you no longer have eyes." Dr. Zix nodded vigorously, his antennae quivering. "And these humans, they're not even fully grown. How can their educational system condone such risks?" Professor Calaor was about to respond and a piercing scream echoed through the preserve. The alien professors froze, their various appendages twitching in fear. "Oh, no," Calaor whispered. "It's happening. One of the students has been attacked." But as they watched, two human students emerged from the tree line, their faces flushed with excitement. The one who had screamed, a young female, was grinning from ear to ear. "Did you see that?" she exclaimed, punching her companion on the arm. "I was like, hey, bear, and it was like, roar. Best day ever." Her companion, a male student built like a small tank, laughed. "I can't believe you actually booped its nose. I thought Coach Rodriguez was going to have a heart attack." As the students high-fived and jogged off to find their next furry playmate, the alien professors stared at each other in disbelief. "Did she just say she booped a bear's nose?" Blip Blop asked weakly. "I believe so," Calaor said, his tentacles curling in distress. And the other student implied that such an action nearly induced cardiac arrest in their instructor, yet they seem pleased by this. Dr. Zix made a sound that might have been a whimper. I'm starting to think that the humans' concept of safety protocols may be somewhat different from our own. As if to punctuate this statement, another scream rang out, followed by a round of enthusiastic cheering. The alien professors turned to see a group of students surrounding a large, furry creature that Calaor's database identified as a mountain lion. The feline predator was currently lying on its back, purring contentedly as the students took turns rubbing its belly. "Who's a good kitty?" one of the students cooed, scratching behind the beast's ears. "You are." "Yes, you are." The mountain lion, a creature that Calaor's research indicated could easily disembowel a grown human with a single swipe of its claws, merely yawned, exposing a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. Professor Chen, who had been observing the students' progress on her data pad, looked up and smiled at the alien professors. "Isn't it wonderful? The students are really bonding with the wildlife." "Bonding?" Dr. Zix squeaked, his antennae quivering. "Is that what you call it?" Professor Chen nodded, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Oh, yes. It's a crucial part of their education. Learning to interact with and appreciate the wonders of Earth's biodiversity, even the dangerous parts." She pointed to another group of students, who were currently engaged in what appeared to be a game of tag with a pack of wolves. The lupin predators were chasing the students through the underbrush, their tongues lolling out in what Calaor could only describe as canine glee. "The wolves seem to be particularly fond of this exercise," Professor Chen said, chuckling. "I think they view the students as particularly entertaining prey." Blip Blop made a strangled noise, their spots flashing in a pattern that roughly translated to, "I want my mommy." Calaor, fighting down his own rising panic, managed to ask, "And what happens if a student is actually caught by one of these playmates?" Professor Chen waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry. The wolves know better than to actually harm the students. They're just playing." She paused, then added, "Of course, there was that one incident last year when a particularly enthusiastic wolf got a little too carried away and accidentally bit off a student's arm. But we were able to reattach it with minimal fuss. The student even got extra credit for demonstrating proper first aid techniques under duress." The alien professors stared at her, their jaws slack with horror. Professor Chen, misinterpreting their expressions, laughed. "I know, right? Our students are so resilient. It really is quite remarkable." She glanced at her data pad, then clapped her hands together. "Ooh, looks like the bears have decided to join in the fun. They've started a game of Catch the Human by the river. I better go make sure they remember the rules about not drowning the students. Be right back." As Professor Chen skipped off, humming cheerfully to herself, the alien professors turned to each other, their expressions a mix of disbelief and dawning horror. "Gentle beings," Professor Calaor said, his voice trembling, "I move that we immediately resign our positions and flee this insane planet." "Seconded," Dr. Zix said fervently, his antennae now permanently locked in a rigid, upright position. "Motion carried," Blip Blop said, their spots pulsing in a frantic, staccato rhythm. "I suggest we also recommend that the Galactic Federation place Earth under permanent quarantine. For the safety of the universe." The other professors nodded in fervent agreement. No sane species would willingly interact with a race that considered near-death experiences a normal part of childhood education. Just as they were about to make a break for the transport vehicles, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the preserve. But this time, it wasn't the excited yell of a human student. It was the terrified howl of a wolf. The alien professors turned, their eyes widening in disbelief as they saw a sight that would forever be seared into their nightmares. A human student, a small female who couldn't have been more than 12 Earth years old, was riding on the back of a massive, snarling bear. And she was chasing a pack of wolves, who were yelping and whining in terror as they tried to escape the ursine juggernaut and its tiny, whooping rider. Yeehaw, the girl hollered, waving what appeared to be a makeshift lasso over her head. Get along, little doggies. The wolves, their tails tucked firmly between their legs, scattered into the underbrush, their plaintive howls fading into the distance. The bear, looking rather pleased with itself, lumbered to a stop and allowed the girl to slide off its back. She gave the massive predator a grateful pat on the snout, then turned and spotted the alien professors staring at her from the observation blind. Hey, professors, she called out, waving enthusiastically. Did you see that? I totally dominated those wolves. I think I'm gonna call this big guy, Fluffy. He's my new best friend. The bear, Fluffy, made a contented grumbling noise and nuzzled the girl's hand, its massive claws leaving deep furrows in the earth. Professor Calaor, his tentacles now wrapped so tightly around himself that he resembled a pretzel, managed to make a strangled noise that might have been an attempt at speech. Dr. Zix, his antennae now vibrating at a frequency that threatened to shatter glass, simply keeled over in a dead faint. Blip Blop, their spots now pulsing in a pattern that was the Centurion equivalent of hysterical laughter, turned to Calaor and said, "You know, I'm starting to think that maybe Earth isn't so bad after all. These humans, they're insane," Professor Calaor supplied, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Utterly, completely, certifiably insane." Blip Blop nodded, their spots now settling into a contemplative rhythm. "Yes. But they're also fascinating. Imagine what we could learn from a species that not only survives but thrives in such an unforgiving environment. Imagine the advances we could make in fields like biology, psychology, engineering." Calaor stared at his colleague, his tentacles slowly uncoiling as he considered this new perspective. You may have a point. This insanity, it's not a flaw. It's an adaptation. A way of not just coping with but mastering their world. He turned back to the window, watching as the human girl led her new, best friend, Fluffy back towards the rest of the class, who were now apparently engaged in a spirited game of catch the tranquilizer dart with a group of mildly sedated mountain lions. "Gentle beings," Professor Calaor said, a note of determination creeping into his voice, "I move that we rescind our previous motion to flee and instead dedicate ourselves to studying these fascinatingly insane humans. For the advancement of science and the betterment of the universe." Dr. Zix, who had regained consciousness just in time to hear this, raised a shaky appendage. "Seconded. But on one condition, we observe from a safe distance. A very, very safe distance." Blip Blop, their spots now pulsing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, nodded. "Motion carried. But let's also recommend that the Galactic Federation increase our hazard pay by a factor of 10. As the alien professors settled in to watch the rest of the practical training session, each silently marveling at the sheer audacity and resilience of the human species, Professor Chen's voice suddenly crackled over the intercom. "Attention, students. Gather round, it's time for the ultimate challenge. Who wants to try milking the rattlesnakes? Extra credit for the first one to get a full vial of venom." The human students cheered, their faces alight with eagerness and determination as they raced towards the waiting reptiles. The alien professors exchanged a look of resigned acceptance, each silently questioning their life choices that had led them to this moment. It was going to be a long, long semester. But one thing was certain, they would never look at the universe, or their place in it, the same way again. For better or for worse, Earth had changed them. And they had a feeling that this was just the beginning. As the sun began to set over the wildlife preserve, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, the human students emerged from the wilderness, their faces flushed with exertion and excitement. Each bore the marks of their close encounters with Earth's fauna, torn clothing, scratches, bruises, and in one case, a rather impressive set of puncture wounds that the student proudly declared were from a love bite delivered by an overly enthusiastic mountain lion. Professor Chen, looking only slightly disheveled from her own adventures with the rattlesnakes, beamed at the students with unmistakable pride. "Excellent work, everyone. You've all demonstrated remarkable bravery, resilience, and adaptability today. These are the qualities that make us human, that allow us to not just survive but thrive in even the most challenging environments. She turned to the alien professors, who were huddled together in a state of shell-shocked awe. I hope this has been an enlightening experience for you, professors. A glimpse into the human spirit and our unique approach to education. Professor Calaor, who had finally managed to uncoil his tentacles from their pretzel-like configuration, nodded slowly. Indeed, Professor Chen. It has been illuminating. And deeply, profoundly unsettling. Dr. Zix, his antennae still vibrating at an alarming frequency, managed to squeak out, I have never, in all my years of academic study across the galaxy, encountered a species quite like yours. The sheer audacity, the reckless disregard for personal safety, the balls. One of the students helpfully supplied, grinning from ear to ear. We've got big, brass ones, right, Professor Chen? Professor Chen, to her credit, only smiled. While I wouldn't phrase it quite like that, Cadet Johnson, the sentiment is accurate. Humans are known throughout the galaxy for our courage, our determination, and yes, our willingness to take risks in pursuit of knowledge and growth. Blip Blop, their bioluminescent spots now pulsing in a contemplative pattern, spoke up. It's more than that, though, isn't it? It's not just about individual bravery or recklessness. It's about your ability to work together, to support and challenge each other, even in the face of overwhelming odds or terrifying circumstances. Professor Chen nodded, her eyes sparkling with approval. Very astute, Professor Blip Blop. That's the essence of what we try to cultivate here at the Academy. Not just individual strength, but collective resilience. The understanding that we are stronger together, that we can overcome any challenge as long as we have each other's backs. She clapped her hands, drawing the attention of the students who were now comparing their various wildlife-inflicted injuries with boisterous pride. All right, cadets, let's head back to base. We've got a lot to discuss and analyze from today's session. And I believe the Med Bay staff are eager to see who won the pool on Most Interesting New Scar. As the students cheered and began to pile back into the transport vehicles, Professor Calaor turned to his colleagues, a look of grim determination on his face. Gentle beings, I believe we have our work cut out for us. Studying these humans, trying to understand their unique abilities and perspective, it's not going to be easy. We're going to be pushed to our limits, both physically and psychologically. Dr. Zix, who had finally managed to get his antennae under control, nodded solemnly. But it's work that needs to be done. For the sake of the Galactic Federation, for the advancement of science, and for our own personal growth. Blip Blop, their spots now pulsing with a steady, determined rhythm, placed a tentacle on each of their colleagues' shoulders. We're in this together. United in our quest for knowledge, for understanding. Just like the humans. Professor Calaor took a deep breath, then nodded. United. Strong. Resilient. Humas. And with that, the three alien professors climbed into their transport vehicle, ready to face whatever insane challenges Earth and its bizarre educational system might throw at them next. As the vehicle hummed to life and began to follow the others back to the academy, Professor Chen's voice crackled over the intercom once more. Oh, and just a reminder, professors. Tomorrow's lesson will be on survival skills in extreme environments. We'll be dropping the students off in the Sahara Desert with just a knife and a canteen each. Should be a breeze after today's session. Professor Calaor closed his eyes, silently praying to whatever deities might be listening for strength, patience, and a very large bottle of Andromeda's finest tentacle relaxant. It was going to be a long, long semester indeed. But somehow, in some strange way, he was starting to look forward to it. After all, if there was one thing he'd learned today, it was that the humans had a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And by the great galactic core, he was going to get strong. Or die trying. Either way, it was sure to be one hell of a ride. As the transport vehicle sped off into the gathering dusk, the wildlife preserve echoed with the distant howls, growls, and screeches of Earth's fauna. And beneath it all, almost imperceptible to any but the most keen-eared listener, was the sound of human laughter. Wild, reckless, and full of the pure, unbridled joy of being alive. It was the sound of a species that had looked into the abyss, the chaos and danger of an uncaring universe, and smiled. For they were human. They were Deathworlders. And they would not just endure, but triumph, no matter the odds. The alien professors, listening to that laughter, felt something stir within them. A flicker of understanding, of connection, and perhaps, just perhaps, the faintest glimmer of that same reckless, indomitable spirit. They were changed beings, marked by their encounter with the insanity and brilliance of Earth. And they knew, deep in their various alien organs, that they would never be the same. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was human. And in that moment, speeding through the night towards an uncertain future, the alien professors couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude for the chain of events that had brought them to this crazy, wonderful, terrifying planet. For better or for worse, they were part of something bigger now. Something strange and new and utterly, beautifully insane. They were part of Earth. Part of humanity. And they wouldn't have it any other way. The transport vehicle disappeared over the horizon, carrying its cargo of alien minds and human spirits towards the next great adventure. And in its wake, the Earth spun on. A jewel of danger and beauty, of chaos and resilience, shining bright in the vast expanse of the universe. A death world. A cradle of life. A home. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the alien professors found themselves once again huddled together, this time in the relative safety of the Academy's observation deck. Below them, the vast expanse of the Sahara Desert stretched out in every direction, an endless sea of sand and rock, broken only by the occasional jutting outcropping or hardy scrub brush. And dotted across this unforgiving landscape, like a scattered handful of particularly suicidal sprinkles on a cake of certain death, were the human students. Each had been dropped off at a random point, equipped with nothing more than a standard-issue survival knife, a single canteen of water, and a cheerful, good luck, from Professor Chen. Professor Calaor, who had spent a sleepless night alternating between existential dread and morbid fascination, turned to his colleagues with a haunted look in his eyes. This is it. We're going to witness the extinction of an entire class of students. No species, no matter how resilient, can possibly survive in such conditions with so little resources. Dr. Zix, who had been fiddling nervously with his antennae, nodded in agreement. I've run the calculations. Based on the average body mass and metabolic rate of a human adolescent, factoring in the extreme heat and lack of readily available sustenance. I give them 6 hours. 8, tops, before dehydration and heat exhaustion claim them all. Blip Blop, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly straightened up, their spots flashing in a pattern of sudden realization. Wait a minute. Didn't Professor Chen say something about this being a survival skills lesson? Professor Calaor blinked, his tentacles twitching. Yes, but, surely she can't expect them to actually survive out there. It's impossible. Blip Blop shook their head, a slow, contemplative pulse rippling across their bioluminescent skin. No. Not impossible. Remember what we learned yesterday? These humans, they thrive on challenge, on pushing themselves to the very brink of what's possible. What if this isn't a death sentence, but an opportunity? A chance for them to prove their mettle, to show us what they're truly capable of. Dr. Zix's antennae quivered, a glimmer of reluctant hope creeping into his eyes. You mean, you think they might actually find a way to survive? To adapt and overcome, like they did with the gravity and the wildlife? Blip Blop nodded, their spots now shimmering with a steady, determined glow. I do. I think we've been underestimating these humans. They're not just reckless thrill seekers or adrenaline junkies. They're problem solvers. Innovators. They look at an impossible situation and see not an insurmountable obstacle, but a challenge to be met head-on. Professor Calaor felt a strange sensation stirring in his chest, a fluttering of something that might have been excitement or terror or some bizarre mixture of the two. So, what do we do? Just sit here and watch, hoping for a miracle? Blip Blop shook their head, a mischievous glint in their eye. No. We do what any good scientist would do. We observe, we analyze, and we learn. Because something tells me that these students are about to teach us a lesson in survival that we won't soon forget. And so, with a mix of trepidation and anticipation, the alien professors settled in to watch the drama unfold. At first, it seemed that their worst fears were to be realized. The students, dropped so unceremoniously into the unforgiving desert, appeared small and fragile, their bright academy uniforms standing out like beacons against the muted tones of sand and stone. Some wandered aimlessly, their steps growing sluggish under the punishing heat of the rising sun. Others simply sat down, conserving their energy and their precious water supplies, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of hope or rescue. But then, slowly but surely, something remarkable began to happen. One student, a lanky male with a shock of red hair, suddenly leapt to his feet, a look of determined inspiration on his face. He began to dig, his survival knife flashing in the sun as he attacked the sand with a fervor that bordered on the manic. "What's he doing?" Professor Calaor asked, leaning forward in his seat, his tentacles quivering with curiosity. "Trying to dig his way to water." Dr. Zix shook his head, his antennae twitching as he analyzed the student's movements. "No. I think he's..." "Yes. Look." The other professors followed Dr. Zix's gaze, their eyes widening as they saw what the student had unearthed. It was a plant, a scraggly, unassuming thing, its leaves dull and brittle under the harsh desert sun. But to the watching aliens, it might as well have been a neon sign flashing, hope. Because if there was plant life, no matter how meager, there was water. The student carefully cut away a section of the plant's root system, then held it aloft in triumph. A cheer went up from the other students who had been watching his efforts, and soon, the desert was alive with activity as the young humans began to scour their surroundings for similar signs of life. Some dug, like the first student, unearthing hidden caches of hardy desert flora. Others turned their attention to the rock outcroppings, searching for hidden crevices and caves that might offer shelter from the sun and the occasional trickle of precious moisture. A few even began to construct makeshift solar stills, using their canteens and bits of uniform to create condensation traps that slowly but surely collected droplets of life-giving water from the arid air. And through it all, the students chattered and laughed, their voices carrying across the vast expanse of the desert, a joyful defiance in the face of the harsh and unforgiving environment. The alien professors watched in awe, their various appendages twitching and quivering with a mix of disbelief and growing respect. They're actually doing it," Professor Calaor whispered, his voice hushed with something that might have been reverence. "They're surviving. No, more than that, they're thriving." Dr. Zix nodded, his antennae bobbing in agreement. "It's incredible. They're using every scrap of knowledge, every ounce of ingenuity and determination, to bend this hostile environment to their will. It's like they're dancing," Blip Blop said softly, their spots pulsing in a gentle, mesmerizing rhythm. "They're dancing with the desert. Not fighting it, not trying to conquer it, but finding a way to move with it, to adapt and flow and find the hidden pockets of life and possibility in even the harshest of landscapes." And as the alien professors watched, they felt something shift within themselves. A realization, understanding, that perhaps the true strength of these humans lay not in their physical prowess or their technological marvels, but in their unbreakable spirit. Their ability to look into the face of adversity and see not an enemy to be vanquished, but a partner in a strange and beautiful dance of survival. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. And still, the students endured. They had found water, shelter, even sources of food in the form of hardy desert plants and the occasional unfortunate lizard or insect. They were tired, battered, and sunburned, but they were alive. And more than that, they were smiling. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Professor Chen's voice crackled over the comms, a note of unmistakable pride in her voice. "All right, my intrepid desert dancers. You've done it. You've survived your first day in the Sahara. Tonight, we feast, and tomorrow, we'll see what other wonders and challenges this magnificent wasteland has to offer." A cheer went up from the students, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that seemed to shatter the very air with its intensity. And in the observation deck, the alien professors found themselves cheering along with them, their own voices mixing with those of the humans in a chorus of triumph and newfound understanding. They had come to Earth seeking knowledge, seeking to unravel the mysteries of this strange and contradictory species. But what they had found was something far greater, far more profound. They had found the heart of humanity. The unquenchable fire that burned within each and every one of these remarkable beings, driving them to explore, to discover, to push the very boundaries of what was possible. And in that moment, the alien professors knew that they would never be the same. They had been touched by that fire, that spirit, and it had ignited something within them. A hunger, a drive, to see more, to learn more, to be more. They were no longer just observers, passive witnesses to the grand drama of human existence. They were part of it now. Part of the dance. And they couldn't wait to see where the music would take them next. As the transport ship lifted off from Earth's surface, the three alien professors sat in contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts and reflections on the incredible journey they had undertaken. Professor Calaor, his tentacles now relaxed and gently undulating, was the first to speak. "I came to Earth expecting to find a primitive, barbaric species. Violent, reckless, and ruled by their base instincts. But what I found was something far more complex and profound." Dr. Zix nodded, his antennae twitching in agreement. "Humans are a paradox. They are fierce, yes, and sometimes terrifyingly so. But they are also kind. Compassionate. They fight with an unmatched ferocity, but they also love with an intensity that burns brighter than any star. Blip Blop, their bioluminescent spots pulsing in a slow, thoughtful rhythm, added, and their resilience, it's like nothing I've ever encountered. They face challenges that would break most species, and not only do they survive, they grow stronger. They adapt, they innovate, they find joy and beauty in even the harshest of circumstances." Professor Calaor leaned back in his seat, his eyes distant as he stared out the viewport at the rapidly receding Earth. "I think, perhaps, that is the true secret of their success. Not just their physical strength or their technological prowess, but their ability to find meaning, purpose, and connection in a chaotic and often cruel universe." Dr. Zix's voice was soft, almost reverent. "They are a young species, still learning and growing. But they have so much to teach us. About courage, about hope, about what it means to be truly alive." Blip Blop spots glowed with a warm, steady light. "And that, I think, is what we must take back to the Galactic Federation. Not just data and observations, but a new understanding. A new perspective on what it means to be sentient, to be part of this vast and wondrous cosmos." Professor Calaor nodded, a small smile playing across his face. "We came as teachers, as observers. But in the end, we were the students. Earth, and its extraordinary inhabitants, taught us more than we could have ever imagined." As the transport ship broke through Earth's atmosphere and into the inky blackness of space, the alien professors fell silent once more, each turning to their own viewports to watch as the blue-green jewel of a planet grew smaller and smaller in the distance. But they knew, deep in their hearts, that a part of them would always remain there. On that wild, dangerous, beautiful world that had changed them forever. Earth. Humanity. Their students, their teachers, their friends. And as the stars beckoned them home, the alien professors couldn't help but smile. For they knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. A new chapter in their own story, and in the grand, unfolding saga of the universe itself. They had come to Earth seeking knowledge, seeking to unravel the mysteries of a strange and alien species. But what they had found was something far more precious. They had found understanding. Empathy. Connection. They had found a reason to hope, to dream, to believe in the potential of all life, no matter how different or strange. And that, they knew, was the greatest lesson of all. As the transport ship hurtled through the cosmos, carrying three changed beings back to a galaxy that suddenly seemed so much brighter, so much more filled with wonder and possibility, a single thought echoed in each of their minds. Thank you, Earth. Thank you, humanity. For showing us the true meaning of strength, of resilience, of life itself. And no matter what challenges the future might hold, no matter what new frontiers they might face, they knew that they would face them together. United. Strong. Resilient. Human. In spirit, if not in form. For they had been to Earth, had walked among titans and giants, and had found, to their endless surprise and delight, that they too had the capacity for greatness. For courage. For compassion. For hope. And that was a lesson they would carry with them, always. To the stars, and beyond. The end.